Welcome on into the show. This is How to Retire with Ben Fuchs. I'm your consumer advocate, Gary Nolan. With us today, filling in, is Gina Mazzadra. Gina is a retirement income certified professional with over 10 years' experience in the last 3 years or so with Fuchs Financial. So let's welcome Gina right in now. Hey, Gina, how are you?
Hi, Gary. Good. How are you?
Good. So, where's our leader today? Can we talk about where he is, or we're not
That
allowed to do
yeah,
that?
yeah. So he's on vacation. Well, it's
Again?
it's it's somewhat of a work-related vacation. He's out with other advisors. They're talking about things that they do differently. I'm sure. I don't know, or maybe
Oh,
or maybe they're just enjoying themselves. I'm not really sure. But he is out over in Europe,
oh,
on like a,
nice.
a river cruise. So
Nice.
yeah, it sounds really nice.
Yeah, well, I hope
So
he doesn't work too hard.
I
Hope
know.
he,
Yeah,
you know, have a
yeah.
little time to enjoy himself. So, you ready
Exactly.
for today's show? You all
I,
set?
I am. Yeah, you?
Now I'm ready to go. Let's do it. All right. So, this is going to be really interesting. We're breaking new ground on the show today with AI. There's no secret. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. It's fundamentally changing the way we work, even the way we invest. Now, here's the bottom line up front. Now, the host on today's show, the show writers got together and they put access to an advanced AI model. I'm not going to say which one, but it's a very powerful tool. We put it together for the ideal retirement plan for an American who's 50 years old. That's what the challenge was, all right?
Mhm.
So we're going to look at the plan and critique it as humans with serious wealth management experience like yourself, Gina.
Mhm.
Can the machines beat us at our own game? Can AI ever replace what we do? Maybe. We're going to find out on today's show, so let's get into it. So I'm going to read this scenario here, and you're going to tell me how the strategies work and whether or not you think it's the right thing or can be enhanced or whatever. So
Mm,
here we go.
right.
So let's start. 50-year-old individual. The goals are accelerate retirement savings, adjust investment strategy for risk management, plan for healthcare and long-term care needs. Those are the goals. Now,
Mhm.
here's the first strategy. I'll read each strategy, Gina, and you comment on these, all right?
Sure.
The first strategy, maximizing retirement contributions. Let's talk about that for a minute.
Right. So sometimes there's some confusion about maximizing contributions. Some people think that maximizing the contributions means contributing up to the match of what their company offers. That's that's putting in just the match. Now, actually maximizing it is um, typically much higher than that. So if you get work for a company that has a 4% match, the total dollar amount that you can actually put in is 22,500 this year. Or no, sorry, 22,000, and then the contribution limit for 50 and older is 30,500. So
Right.
it's actually significantly higher than just putting in that match. So to take advantage of the higher contribution limits for individuals 50 and older in retirement accounts, you want to increase the savings rate, allocate more towards retirement savings specifically if behind on what your goals are.
Okay, that sounds good. How about this one? Reevaluate investment portfolio. What do they mean by that, and how does that work?
So yeah, so adjusting asset allocation, so gradually shifting towards a more balanced portfolio where you're going to reduce your risk and incorporate bonds or maybe some alternatives to bonds and other income generating investments. Just instead of just having everything in like the S&P 500, you maybe want to have some things that are more income oriented rather than growth oriented. And then diversification, ensuring the investments are diversified across various asset classes and sectors. And then also diversifying the types of accounts that you have. So being
Mm-hmm.
smart about what types of investments you have in what types of accounts.
Right. So that's what AI recommended. Would you probably recommend pretty much the same thing in that respect?
Yeah, so I mean, that is, a typical recommendation that we like to make.
Okay. How about this one? Debt reduction. Debt is always a big issue during retirement, isn't it, Gina?
Yes, yes, it can be. So eliminating high interest debt and prioritizing paying off the high interest debt first. So I had somebody come in last week and they had, I don't know, $11,000 of credit card debt, and then they had their mortgage. Mortgage is fine. They were making $50 a month extra payments to their mortgage, and I told them stop doing that because your mortgage is like 3% and your credit card is like 25 to
Sure.
27%. So
Sure.
instead of putting the $50 towards the mortgage, put it towards the credit card and get that knocked down first. I think it's okay to have a mortgage, especially when it's later on and most of the payments are going towards principal instead of interest, and it's a much lower rate of return, rate of interest rate rather than what the credit cards are doing.
All right. Let's talk about the next one, which is Retirement income planning. Income planning, a big, big part of retirement planning, Gina.
Right. So estimating retirement expenses, projecting retirement living costs, and determining um, if you have the savings necessary to live on when you get to retirement, as well as the income. So identifying income sources, assessing expected income from Social Security, pensions, and personal savings. So a lot of times, what happens is, you know, in the past, people who are retiring today, their parents had pensions that they were relying on along with the Social Security, which isn't always, it's not as common today. People aren't getting pensions today. So they are getting the Social Security, but they're no longer getting the pension. So what they have to do is save away into those, 401k type accounts and then generate income on that savings, as opposed to their parents getting the pension. So it's just a little bit different. It's been a change for the retirees that we're seeing today. So
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah.
Yeah. And you need multiple income streams. I mean, it's really hard to rely on Social Security by itself. Am I right,
Yeah,
Gina?
yeah, it definitely can be. And then, we also want to figure out what the expenses are by, going through our checking account and figuring out, all right, how much are we actually spending on a monthly basis, and is the income going to meet that?
All right, got about 3, 4 minutes left. How
Yeah.
about this one? Healthcare and long-term care planning, especially if you're in that gap. Let's say you're 62, try to retire, Medicare doesn't kick in. So this is something that's really serious for a lot of retirees or
Yeah.
pre-retirees. Gina, am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to review health insurance coverage, ensure adequate coverage leading up to Medicare eligibility. We want to consider long term care insurance and evaluate the need for long term care insurance to protect our assets. So, if you have family members that maybe suffered from dementia or other illnesses, and you think that you might be falling in that same path, then you might want to consider long term care. I mean, it is expensive, so it's definitely not for everybody, but it's something to consider. And
Mm-hmm.
we do actually have somebody in our office who handles Medicare. So he gives free opinion and kind of goes through planning on Medicare with our clients or anybody who wants to come and meet with him. His name is Josh. He's super nice. But yeah, we do have someone in house who does Medicare.
That's very confusing, Medicare, isn't it? I mean, there's
Yeah.
so many different plans, particularly,
Yeah.
when you're looking for an advantage plan or a supplemental plan. Am I right?
It requires a good amount of research to find out what's going to be the most cost effective for you, depending on, what medications you take or, all your other health situations.
Yeah, I went through that myself not too long ago with a guy that works with us here that he specialized in Medicare. And the interesting thing, Gina, it comes down to each county. He had asked me what county I lived
Oh,
in because
yeah.
every county is different. I thought that was pretty amazing.
Right.
It's pretty
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
All right, let's get on to the next one. Financial planning and advice. That's where you need a real person, I think, Gina, as opposed to
Yeah.
AI. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, if you want to consult a financial advisor and work with a professional to refine retirement strategies and address any gaps, that's what we do here. So, we do use software in our office to help put base plans together. But then at the end of the day, we have to remember that it's a computer system and it's looking at things very black and white. It's not accounting for any change in lifestyle or change in income or change, so when we're using those computer systems, again, it's a computer system. It's not a person. It can't use logic to decide, what changes need to be made going forward, or if there's like any huge gaps. So that's probably the biggest difference between working with an advisor and AI.
Sure.
Um,
Let's squeeze in one more,
yeah.
Gina. Okay, let me grab this one for you. Maximize Social Security benefits. We know it starts at 62, maxes out at 70,
Hmm.
but talk about that for just a moment.
Yeah. So, um, plan timing, strategize when to take Social Security benefits to maximize lifetime benefits. So it could depend on when you retire and if there's, what your need for income is at the time that you retire. Because if you retire at 62 and, you know, you don't really want to wait until 67 if you're going to need income to live on. You just do. So you're going to have to take it a little sooner rather than later if you do want to retire earlier, and that's okay. We can talk through if it's, how it will impact you. Maybe it wouldn't be the best case scenario, but we can talk about how it's going to impact you and if that's then going to be right for your lifestyle choices.
All right, so let's get to our second segment today. The financial trial of the century is upon us, whether you're part of the mass exodus of workers in the peak 65 phenomenon, economic up and downs, the retirement of the pension three-legged stool retirement systems your parents use. Let's just say retirement planning process can be overwhelming. So we're diving into a hypothetical case studies showing how to cut through the noise and identify core issues of each of these. So let's get started with our case study. Gina, I'll read
Yeah,
the case study
sure.
and you can talk about the core issues and what they need to do. So here
Sounds
we
good.
go. Get ready. All right. So case one. I'd like to call the story of the unprepared retiree. Now, John is 65 years old, planning to retire solely on Social Security. He's unmarried, doesn't have any children. Now, his father had a pension, Social Security was more than fine. So, what are John's core issues, and how can folks in similar situations avoid these issues that John faced? A daunting issue here, maybe Social Security alone. Boy, that's going to be a tough go, Gina. What can he do?
So, I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the show. So, somebody who's relying only on Social Security because they thought that they would get a pension like their parents did, that's been really common among people that we've seen lately. So, if he has inadequate savings and he failed to save beyond the Social Security, creating a gap in his retirement income, he may want to consider working a few years longer, reducing expenses. I mean, but there's not just one path to get there. There's multiple ways and multiple options that we can do to work with somebody. But one of them could be just delaying your retirement, taking Social Security at a later date so that you're getting also that higher amount. You're not pulling from savings earlier. You're adding to them for that couple year time period. And then, lack of financial literacy. He obviously didn't understand the investment options and how to grow his savings. Instead of holding things just in cash, generally we want to keep safe money safe, but he could put them even in like an annuity or a CD or something like even a high yield savings just to get some rate of return as opposed to what the 0.02% that you might get in a typical savings account. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So he really should seek professional help. Maybe work part time too, Gina?
That's always a good option too. Yes. Yes. So if he can work part time and still get some income that way and then take Social Security, if that's what he needs to support himself, there's multiple different paths to get to where he wants to be.
Have you had clients like that
Oh,
have just
yeah.
real way behind the curve here, so to speak?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And some people who come in, they don't even necessarily become clients. They just want some input and some guidance on how to get there. So that's okay too. We can always offer our services and talk through some situations with people. It doesn't mean that you have to become a client, but it could help you to get to where you need to be.
Right, and you're happy to do that, the team,
Yeah.
right? You do
Yeah.
that all the time,
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of people that we talk to.
Oh, that's terrific. Okay, I
Yeah.
love that. All right, how about this one? Case number two, the overconfident investor. Next, we have Lisa. She's 62, heavily invested in a single stock, believing it would secure her retirement. So let's talk about the core issues and the strategies, the losing strategy and the winning strategy for Lisa.
Okay, so we have seen people like this. We actually saw somebody, Ben and I both with this one person who had all of his retirement savings in Tesla. And Tesla was doing great. He made money on it, which is excellent. The only problem is if that stock were to go down, all of his retirement savings were in that. He wanted to retire sooner rather than later. So, putting that much risk in retirement when you're no longer going to have your income to rely on to cover your bills, that's something we want to make changes to. So in terms of like concentration of risk, Lisa sounds like she ignored the diversification, putting all her investments in one asset. And sometimes it is emotional decision making. So she made decisions about her financial well being based off of worry and fear, or an honest uncertainty that would unfortunately lead to poor investment choices. So the guy who had all this Tesla stock, I mean, he just like loved Elon Musk and wanted to keep it because he
Right.
was emotionally attached to it and he did not want to sell it. So unfortunately, we were not able to help him, even though we did, talk through the risk of how he had everything allocated. He wanted to come and talk to us. We talked to him and gave him our opinion. He loved Tesla, so he kept it, and that's okay. Not what we would do here, but that's something that we do see.
At the end of the day, that was his choice. So
Exactly.
what would be a winning strategy in that situation? What would you tell folks, Gina?
I mean, if he wants professional advice, that's what he's coming to get. I think that he should go home, think it over, sleep on the advice that we gave him, and it would be great if he took some of the advice, or even we're willing to part with some of that Tesla stock and listen to what we were saying. Obviously, we can't tell the future. We don't know what's going to happen with the Tesla stock. It could go up way more, and then he might be mad at us, but it could tank, and then what's he left with when he's already retired and having no income? So there's a lot of
talked about that,
volatility.
A lot about diversification.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. You never know what's going to happen. Do you find that a lot, like clients who maybe have worked for one company for 20, 30 years?
Oh, absolutely.
Want to invest in a company stock heavily, Gina, because they have an emotional attachment to the company. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We have some people like with like a lot of United Healthcare stock, which is great. It's done well. It's gone up. The only problem, it could depend on the type of account that it's in. So if it's in a brokerage, non-qualified type account, then we have to be cautious about how much we're selling of it, because we don't want to create outrageous capital gains in their account either. So, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And
So that's Lisa. So it was heavily invested in a single stock, and the recommendation would be to diversify and not put all your eggs in one basket. Pretty much, right, Gina?
Exactly. And it also but it can also depend on the type of account it is. If it's in a retirement IRA, that's different than if it were in a non-qualified. So depending on the account type is how we want to handle it.
All right, our final case study is the late planners. Tom and Sarah, both 58 years old. They just realized they haven't saved enough for retirement. Let's talk about the core issues and a winning strategy.
Yeah. So the delay in making financial decisions can come at a big cost, because benefits like compounding interest, it'll be a challenge to save enough without working longer and living a different lifestyle. But it's not impossible, but it is assuming that they have time to catch up. That they, so again, there's a few different ways we can go about it. We can delay retirement. We can reduce expenses. Maybe we do a little combination of the two. There are ways to get there, but it's going to require some hard work on their end, I'm sure.
So what are some winning strategies, Gina? As you mentioned a few of them, what else can they do?
So they could create a budget. They can create a detailed budget to maximize their 401k contributions. They can make a spending plan and stick to it. So, going through their checking account and figuring out where all these payments are going. Opening up an HSA account. So by setting up an HSA, a health savings account, they plan for the future for medical expenses and tax advantages there. Because, the HSA, they don't expire. So you can put money into them. It's not money that's going to go bad. And you know that you'll have it for medical expenses, which typically people, have at some point in their lives. So that is a good tax-friendly way to save, at least for that portion. These steps not only help folks in similar spots to save, but also ease their concerns about healthcare costs.
Mm-hmm. Do you recommend people do a little test run on retirement savings and spending before they go into retirement, like a test run?
All the time.
They could do, yeah.
Yeah, all the time. Sometimes I tell people, if it's a goal to cut back on spending, do it for a 3-month period before you actually retire and see if you're comfortable living on it. See if it works for you. Because if it doesn't, then we'll figure out something else. But at least you haven't pulled the trigger and retired yet. It just adds a level of like comfort to let people know, yeah, I can live on this much, as opposed to retiring and then trying to figure it out.
All right. So this is an interesting segment, more of a lifestyle segment than opposed to the nuts and bolts of the money and the investments and the income and all that. But it's kind of a fun one. Nearly 40% of Americans 50 and over are using technology to learn new skills, whether it's mastering smart home devices or taking online classes. Many see retirement as opportunity to pursue new passions. Others, like me, just want to sit on the couch, Gina, when I retire.
I don't blame you.
No, I'm kidding. I love learning new things. Anyway, so a couple of years ago, I wasn't at the retirement age, but my neighbor across the street said, "Hey, let's go do something fun." I go, "Okay, what are we talking about?" My neighbor and the couple across the street from my wife and I, we learned to play bocce ball, of all things.
Oh, that sounds so fun.
It was fun. I wasn't very good at it, but it was fun.
Bocce is fun. I like that.
So you got to learn new things from time to time. Anyway, so how does this influence your financial planning? Let's explore some new skills, learning new skills and hobbies impact your budget and your retirement strategy. All right, so
Mm-hmm.
we got a bunch of questions here, Gina, that we'll dive into. So, how can I budget for courses, equipment, or new hobbies after I retire? Let's talk about that for a little bit.
So you can allocate a portion of your discretionary budget to lifelong learning and hobbies. So look for a free, low-cost online resources to help reduce your expenses. But basically, you can set aside a certain portion of your income to allocate towards what you want to do. So, look at what your income is, look at what your expenses are, figure out which expenses are necessary and which are not. And from there, you can figure out, how much money can I actually allocate towards this. And, it also depends on how expensive the hobby is. So, if it's something like yachting, then maybe
Yeah.
we need to figure out a different scenario. But something like if you just enjoy golf or whatever, that can be expensive, but it's doable. We can figure out how much per month we can afford to allocate towards going golfing, going maybe you have a membership somewhere. But yeah, that's definitely something we can work on.
Do you have a lot of clients that do that, that do other
Yeah.
things like this, like whether it's golf or learning new skills or even college classes, I guess, whether
How
online or in person, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have one client who she loves sailing. That's like her passion. She absolutely loves it. And, we talk about budgeting for her to do that and keep up with that as much as she can. But yeah, we have a lot of people who golf, people who watch their grandkids, um, all over the place with
Hmm.
hobbies.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about the next one. Should I consider continuing education as part of my retirement plan for mental stimulation and social connections? Sometimes it's really good to get active, stay active mentally, Gina, particularly in your later years. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, continuing education can improve cognitive health. It can reduce healthcare costs, and it can foster social connections that improve overall well-being. So, I'm no doctor, but I do believe that continuing to learn throughout your life is going to help. With keeping your mind going and keeping your mind active throughout retirement, it's going to be overall beneficial for you. But so yeah, absolutely. There are college courses too that I've seen offered online, that you can sign up for. So they're all over the place.
Hmm. Yeah, a friend of mine does community theater, and
Oh,
has always wanted
awesome.
to do theater, and did it when he was in college, and then totally got away his career. It was nothing like that, but decided to get back to it when he approached retirement. So that was good for him.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I couldn't. I don't know how they do it because I can't memorize the lines. I
Yeah,
I would need big cue cards, Gina. That's
yeah.
what I would need.
I know. I know.
Yeah, not for me. All right. The show is How to Retire with Ben Fuchs. I'm Gary Nolan, your consumer advocate. With us each week at this time is usually Ben Fuchs, but Gina is filling in today, and Gina is a retirement income certified professional with over 10 years experience. What does that mean, Gina? Let's talk about that for just a second.
Sure.
What does that designation mean for our
Uh,
listeners?
Yeah, so retirement income certified professional is basically something that I studied to help figure out ways for my clients to generate additional sources of income or make that income last them longer. It was, really focusing on income in retirement and different strategies that can be used to help people get the income that they need based on their current situations or what changes they might need to make to their current situations to be comfortable throughout retirement.
Right. So there was a test for this. You had to pass a test, correct?
Yes, yeah. So I finished that test about 3 days before my first son was born. So
Oh,
yeah, it
wow.
was tight on time, right? Nothing like waiting till the last minute.
But Gina got it done, folks. That's why
Yeah.
she's here with us today. Yeah, and she's happy to be part of Ben Fuchs Financial. How long you been with Fuchs Financial again? I
Yeah,
think I said like 3 years.
I've been here for a little over 3 years now. So I joined Ben a few years in after he opened his doors, and I had actually been in contact with him for several years before I actually joined him. And then the timing finally felt right where I joined the team, and I've been extremely happy here. And since then, we've actually grown quite a bit. We've doubled in size since he's hired me, so we're doing well, and um, you know uh, we're we're
Yeah,
you
great.
know
That's
yeah,
great
we're
news.
getting
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I'm sure the radio show had a lot to do with that success, Gina. I'm sure.
I'm sure it did. He does great on radio.
There you go. All right, so this one is an interesting question. Are there specific tax deductions for pursuing education activities in retirement? I don't know about that. What do you think?
So specific tax deductions that there are. So there are a limited deductions for educational expenses. Unless you're pursuing income generating activities. But yeah, when you're going to file your taxes, there is a spot on the income tax that you can actually fill out that shows that you had this certain amount going towards educational expenses. So yeah, absolutely. Some states offer senior citizen discounts on tuition as well, which is, depending on the state that you're in, you can look online and on the state website and see if that would apply to you.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, a couple more questions to go. So, how can lifelong learning help reduce healthcare costs by keeping us mentally active? How about that?
Right. So again, I'm not a doctor, but staying mentally active through learning reduces risk of cognitive decline and potentially lowers long-term healthcare costs by preventing conditions like dementia. So, if you're mentally motivated and active, it there are studies that show that it helps put off any signs of dementia or Alzheimer's, and overall that's going to benefit you, and there's no downside to it. So there's
Sure. Yeah.
potential upside, there's potential benefits, there's potential health benefits, but there's no downside to it. So why not?
Right. Absolutely. And final question, fifth question. What financial strategies can I use to balance new interest and necessary retirement expenses? Because it is a balancing act, Gina.
Right. So to prioritize essential expenses first, and then allocate a portion of your discretionary spending to hobbies. So track these expenses closely to avoid overspending. A lot of times, I actually have a notepad that I track, where everything goes every month. You can do it in a notepad. You can do it in the notes section on your phone too. That's super easy. But just making sure that you're aware of where your money's going every month is going to help make you feel in control and on top of your expenses.
Yeah, and there's some apps that do that too, Gina. I can't remember. I used one for a while,
Mm.
and then I got tired of using it. But I know there's some apps that do that as well. Am I right?
There are. I find it easy to just go through it. Like at the end of each month, I look at the expenses for that prior month. And if I just kind of remember each month, once I get into the first week of the new month, I then look back on my checking account balance and I figure out, where did everything go. And personally for me, that's pretty easy because it's
Works
not
for you.
something
Yeah.
I'm not inputting data every time I go to the store. I'm just looking back every month and taking a quick look at it.
Have you had to tell a client, what you're doing is great, but you need to cut back on your discretionary spending, maybe a little bit overboard, so to speak?
I have. And I don't like telling people that, but I
Yeah.
definitely have suggested to people that cutting back on expenses is going to benefit them in the long run. And, people don't always like to hear it, but I also
Yeah.
don't want to sugarcoat something when it's going to have an impact on their retirement. I don't want to sugarcoat something and say, "Oh yeah, you're going to be fine," and then have them get to retirement and say, "Hey, well, I thought that, I thought I had the income to cover all this, and
Sure.
turns out I don't." So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather be a little more blunt and say it how it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
And that's
have had to
part of,
have,
that's
yeah,
part of Ben Fuchs' fiduciary responsibility that he tells it like it is. And even
yeah.
though the same for you, Gina, am I right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's our favorite part of the show. It's where listeners participate. It is time for Q&A. Irene in Mystic. I'm currently in my 50s. No, this is no time to taper retirement savings. I want to max out my retirement contributions. I also have another $120,000 in a savings account. I want to invest in a non-retirement account. What would be the best way to invest on this? What can we have for Irene?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have 120 in savings. Generally, which I've said before, we like to keep safe money safe. So what we're going to be looking for the 120,000 is something that's going to get a higher rate of return, that's not going to go down in value unless you're super comfortable and really want to do that. But generally, again, we don't want to take risk with safe money because when we get to retirement, that's not the time to be taking more risk. That's the time to be taking less risk. So, some options are, fixed index annuities are great. The market goes up, you go up just not as much. Market goes down and you stay level, so you don't lose anything. CDs, where you're going to get, today maybe a 4.5%, 5% rate of return. There's even such things as high yield savings, where you can access that money anytime. But the bank, on the other hand, has the ability to change the rate of return on you at any time as well. But it does still get some rate of return rather than a typical savings or checking account that's getting next to nothing.
Mm-hmm. Do you aspire to the 4%, not the 4%, the rule of 100, Gina, in case it's kind of a rule of thumb. Our listeners, if they're not familiar with it, let's say she's in her 50s. Let's say she's 55. So that means you subtract 100 minus 55. So
Yeah.
risk could be like 45%. Is that right? Some
I've
stocks
I've
and
heard
bonds?
yeah, I've heard people doing that, and that's fine. I mean, if you're doing things on your own, that's a fine way to look at it. We look at it in much more detail. We'll go through specific scenarios with you and figure out how much risk you really are comfortable with. So, we'll say, all right, if we had $100,000 that we were investing in the market, how much would you be comfortable losing versus what the gains could potentially
Sure.
be? And, because we really do want to know, what is your comfort level with loss too? Because in the market, you can't control it. We can't tell you when it's going to go up or down. So in worst case scenario, if the market does come down significantly, how much are you comfortable losing? And that's
Mm-hmm.
part of how we base the risk analysis on, because unfortunately those things happen.
Right, yeah. And that's why, the older you get, that's why the rule of 100 works for some people, because the older you get, the more conservative you basically want to be.
Yeah,
But everybody's individual.
right.
Everybody's different at their risk tolerance, Gina. Am I right?
Yeah, so that's a general rule of thumb. We don't really use rule of thumb because we're planning for each specific individual. So,
Right.
I mean, rule of thumb is fine, but if we're planning for you, we're planning for you and not using some general rule.
Right, like yeah. Ben does not like the 4% rule. We've talked about that in prior shows. Not
Yeah,
happy with that.
yeah, yeah.
All right, let's talk about. Let's see what we have for Wayne in Westbrook. How can one take advantage of the investment world as it stands today and potentially grow retirement savings net to worth 3 million over time? I hear that's a new magic number to save for retirement. I don't know where that came in, but now I used to hear it was like 1 million. Now it's 3 million. Inflation, Gina. I guess that's
Inflation
what
is
he's
a
talking
little
about.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. That's a lot of money. But anyway, how do you plan for that? How does that work?
How do we plan to potentially grow to 3 million? So, I don't believe that there's a magic number. It's again depending on your individual situation. So, we want to look at what do we have saved, what are we earning, what are we spending, and based on those three things, that will tell us how much we need to put away in retirement so that on top of the retirement income like Social Security, potential of pension, how much do we have to draw down on what we have saved so that it can counter some of the expenses that we have. And the expenses again are going to depend on our individual lifestyle, so different for everybody. So
Sure.
again, there's not really a magic number. um, but what can we take advantage of? You know, if you want to save to $3 million over time, obviously it's going to take time to do that. So, it depends on how much you currently have saved and how much you're contributing into the 401k plans or whatever plan you have through work. You're going to just really have to be diligent in putting that money into a savings account, into an IRA or a 401k or a Roth, and um, you know, it also depends on what your income is. So some people have substantial income that they can afford to max out their 401ks, meaning that if you're over 50, that $30,500
Sure.
limit.
Yeah.
Some people can comfortably do that, while others cannot. And if, either situation, you just have to be diligent about saving that money away so that you have it for future use if you want to get to 3
Hmm.
million over time, right?
Right. Do you have a wide range of clients where some can retire on, I don't know, 250, 500,000 to
Yeah.
10 million and everywhere in between, Gina? I mean, you have all kinds of clients, right? Like that.
Absolutely. And again, it really just depends on lifestyle. So, if you're someone who doesn't do a lot and kind of stays home and socks away all their money, that doesn't sound all that fun.
Nope.
But it definitely helps those people when they get to retirement, So, But I think at the end of the day, it's all about balance, because we still do really want our clients to do the things that they want to do when they get there, because, everyone worked their lives putting this
Yeah.
money away, and you want to enjoy it. You don't want to just
Sure.
let it pass you by. So part of our job is to help our clients figure out what they can spend and still be comfortable and do the things that they want to do. That's really important to us.
David in West Hartford. My primary concern is to grow my reserve of $240,000, which has been a sitting duck forever with no gains. Now I'm all in on the long-term game, but my savings lying in the bank and inflation, plus my portfolio losing gains every day. I need a remedy. I'm all ears. What can we have for David?
All right. So we have the 240 in the bank that's not getting any interest. And yeah, I mean, that's going to start to have less and less value when you're looking at inflation. So we do at least want to do something that's going to counter some of the inflation. So again, keeping safe money safe, we have a few options to choose from. CDs, high yield savings, annuities. There are thousands of different types of annuities. So we are able to use some tools that we have in the office to figure out what's going to be a better fit for you, depending on, what you're really looking for, if it's income or if it's, safe growth. So, and your portfolio that's losing gains every day, we can look at what you have held in those accounts and see what changes we might make if you were to work with us. We're happy to do that for you and just give our opinion.
Yeah, I think David needs to meet with you, Gina, and the team and figure out how best to invest that money, because money just sitting in the bank, he's going backwards because of inflation. Am I right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get it to one more question. Judith in Portland, I'm planning to put 85,000 dividend stocks, so I'll be making 30% per year on dividend returns. Any advice? Am I going about this the right way? All in dividend stocks, Gina.
All right, so you're having the $85,000 that you're putting into dividend stocks to make up 30% per year in dividend returns. Is that to live on? And also, I want to know, what type of account is that in? So if it's in an IRA, dividends are fine in there. IRAs are the place that we generally want to be producing income in retirement, because we have more control over the taxes. Now, if that's in a non-qualified account, like a brokerage account, we want to be cautious and see what other account types we have available to us, because that could be causing some capital gains that you might not want to deal with. So, that's great that you're having that lump sum able to save and putting it away to get returns. But we also want to be smart about what types of accounts we're putting that into, and, not just one dividend stock, I hope either. I hope it's a portfolio of different ones. Sometimes that can definitely be beneficial, especially in an IRA. But there's a lot of options to choose from. So if you're looking for income, come talk to us and we can talk through what those options are.
All right, terrific. Judith, David, Wayne, Irene, thank you for all your questions. Well, that's it. That's a wrap for today. We'd like to thank everyone for listening. Hope you found the information we presented helpful. Look forward to all of you being back next week. We'll have new topics and new questions right here on How to Retire with Ben Fuchs. Gina filling in this week. Gina, what do you say you do it next week, too? You want to do that?
Yeah, I think that's the plan so far. I'd love to.
Gina, have a good weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, Gary. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Investment advisory services are offered through Foundations Investment Advisors, LLC, hereafter known as Foundations, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The content provided is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The views, statements, and opinions expressed herein are those of the individual speakers and not necessarily those of Foundations and its affiliates. The information contained herein does not constitute an offer to sell any securities or represent an express or implied opinion or endorsement of any specific investment, opportunity, offering, or issuer. Any discussion of performance or returns is not indicative of future results. Any discussions of specific strategies are for informational purposes only and have been provided to help determine whether they may be appropriate for your specific situation. If applicable, the primary goal in converting retirement assets into a Roth IRA is to reduce the future tax liability on the distributions you take in retirement or on the distributions of your beneficiaries. Each individual investor situation is different, and ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstances. Foundations only transacts business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration as an investment advisor is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. Nothing herein constitutes a recommendation that any security, portfolio of securities, or investment strategy is suitable for any person. No legal or tax advice is provided. Please review your retirement, tax, and legacy planning strategies with a legal or tax professional before transacting or implementing any strategy discussed herein. Any comments regarding safe and secure investments and guaranteed income streams refer only to fixed insurance products. They do not refer in any way to investment advisory products. Rates and guarantees provided by insurance products and annuities are subject to the financial strength of the issuing insurance company, not guaranteed by any bank or the FDIC. This is not endorsed or affiliated with the Social Security Administration, any federal Medicare program, or any U.S. government agency. If applicable, we do not offer every plan available in your area. Any information we provide is limited to those plans we do offer in your area. Please contact Medicare.gov or 1-800-Medicare to get information on all of your options. All rights reserved.